would like to turn the floor over now to Toby, who will focus on another aspect of social justice that's really critical in these topics, which is around gender-based violence and surveillance. And it's just a delight to be able to introduce you, Toby. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Theresa, and thank you so much to AJ and Theresa. I feel like there are a lot of overlaps in our conversations, and I will only speak briefly, and I hope that we can dive into conversation following that and bring these two communities together. So I'm going to be speaking about surveillance and gender-based violence. I am speaking to you from the land of the Atfalati people, part of the Kalapuya Nation, here in the Tualatin River Valley, a waterway which flows from here into the Willamette River and from the Willamette to the Columbia, and joining up with the Columbia, coming from Canada down and then into the Pacific Ocean, so connecting us to Australia. And of course, the whole world is covered with water, so connecting us over to the UK and to the very sleepy folks over there. Jeremy, thanks for staying with us. So I acknowledge these lands that I live on and work from and learn together with, and I hope that you each can learn more about the lands if you do not already know that you are standing and living on. I'm going to share with you to start off a little bit of a conversation starter, and this is a brief video, so have your hands over your volume just in case you want to adjust it. I don't have it particularly loud, but just as a heads up that there will be some sound here. It's just a short one minute clip.
You want to keep an eye on your loved one or your employee because you suspect they're hiding something and it might get too late? How do you know where they are or what they're doing right now? Maybe they're not really telling you the truth about their activities or whereabouts. You are worried, so you wonder if the only way to find out is to know what they do on their cell phones right away. You know that's the only way to give you all the answers. What you need right now is a solution that lets you uncover the truth by secretly monitoring all the activities of your loved one or employee and lets you know their location at all times. Don't worry, there's a powerful solution and it's called Stealth Genie. The most powerful cell phone spy software available on any iPhone, Android, and BlackBerry phone, especially designed for you, but also used by over 100,000 satisfied customers. Instantly find out where they are by tracking their GPS location. Even better, you'll receive alerts when they leave a certain area or enter a prohibited location.
In my field, working on gender-based violence, we have come to talk about this kind of monitoring software as stalkerware, and you'll see that increasingly in the news. In fact, there's a coalition against stalkerware made up of a number of the antivirus, anti-malware companies and organizations like mine. But I think it's really interesting, this clip, in how it overlaps with the talk that we just had in this group, which is that much of this is available in a consumer and on a commercial market as a way to track your children or a way to track your employees. In all of these situations, there is a differential of power in which one person is presumed to acceptably be tracking the location and status and activities of another person. And so this allowability of parental monitoring of children through secret means, which, by the way, my organization ardently opposes, we are saying that it is acceptable for someone who has responsibility for another to have this kind of privacy invasion, this kind of surveillance, which certainly ties into our conversations earlier in the morning in Australia, earlier in the day for the rest of us. We do not want to watch that again, though. But I think it's really important to note that while there is dedicated software, whether you call it spyware or parental monitoring software or stalkerware, that these features are actually built into the everyday technology that we have and requires no additional app to be installed, whether that's Apple or any other phone, your Android phone, allowing you to find a lost device. When we have shared family plans, when we have groups of friends, and this expectation that we should be able to find our own devices and to find each other with or without the explicit permission of another person, it is problematic and it is easily accessible rather. The other way that this turns up is not just real-time tracking, but this inquiry into the long history of our movements. Here, I'm showing you a little window into my own world of how Google has tracked my location across multiple continents and locations over a period of years. You can see each red spot represents a place that I have been. And this is precisely the kind of built-in by default technology that allows someone who wants to know more about me, who wants to surveil me, who is intimate to me, who can walk into my space and pick up my smartphone, or who knows my password or can coerce me into sharing it, can log into my accounts from any place and find out both my current position, but also my historical position, and to investigate that and perhaps use it to harm me. Moving though from what that picture of that negative use is into how people who experience this kind of abuse resist it through what Jill Messing and others call creative resistance. They use these same tools the tools of technology to determine what is happening. I can go in and investigate my own settings and see whether that information is being tracked. I can perhaps see who has inquired into that, who has logged into my account to look at that information. I can go in and find my own privacy settings, my own account security settings, and maybe change those to give myself a greater degree of invisibility in these kinds of situations where visibility is a risk, where visibility leads to harm. In some cases, though, I might choose to keep that kind of surveillance in place. And you might ask, why? It could be to keep the peace in a relationship as a strategy of de-escalation to avoid violence. Oftentimes, when notifications are sent to someone who has been surveilling my account through these everyday means, that violence might escalate. There's also sort of a step further. How could we counter this surveillance? In fact, many people who experience abuse in their lives will turn around and watch the watcher. We often tell people, I don't mean me like myself in my role, but people who are in law enforcement, people who support victims of abuse will often say, get off of social media, get rid of your phone, disconnect from the person who has been harming you. But in fact, that kind of counter surveillance of turning around and watching what the other person is doing helps to gauge risk, helps to gauge the level of vulnerability, turning around and saying, what is their location? Are they near me? Do I need to take action to protect myself? There's also a use of panic buttons in which in an emergency, I have quick access to let emergency services know to come help me, or that I might share my location with a friend or a family member so that they can track my journey home to ensure safety. There's also a trend toward crowdsourced geographies of risk, where a group of people who are vulnerable inform each other and create a collective map in which they describe where they may face more risk. And there is also state surveillance, this agreement that we have made that when certain people violate the law, whether that's sex offenders or other people who have caused harm to other people, that it may be acceptable that the state in fact watches them and perhaps makes that information public. So I'm going to share a couple of screenshot examples of that. This is an app from the UK developed by the family of a young woman who was killed by her abuser. This app taps into technology used in a corporate setting to keep employees safe, is the rationale there, and allows people to share their journey with a trusted person as they go home, also allows for that kind of panic button notification. You can see the promise here that every 5 seconds, the platform will update your precise location based on your speed and movement activity to identify where you are once an alert has been raised. This is an example of that crowdsourced geography of risk from a group called Hollaback that tracks street harassment and other abuse globally. You can see each star here is a group of representation of reports around abuse, and you can see that each number represents the number of reported incidents. This is an example from the United States where we do both track sex offender residences and then share those publicly in some cases. So here you can see this is from the state of California, and paralleling Reese's example of the snap map heat map around a school. I chose a school location in the city of Dublin in California and was able to see that there are 5 registered sex offenders who live within the area of that school. And there are some drawbacks to these kinds of geographic tools and geolocation. And I think that they are really important to note. You might come in thinking, Toby works in the area of gender-based violence. She probably supports each one of these efforts, but there are pros and cons, and there are broader societal questions that we should ask as well. One of the first of those is that we are placing what is called the burden of safety work onto victims and survivors of violence, that systems rarely adequately protect them. And so often this work of figuring out whether they are surveilled, how they are surveilled, and then to make the very difficult choice about whether or not to stop being surveilled and to navigate their own level of risk around that is placed on a survivor, often to navigate by themselves. In terms of panic button apps and these kinds of tools that we use to help ourselves to feel safe as we move through a culture in which we are told often to not feel safe when we are alone, particularly as women or non-binary people, there can be a false sense of security, that because I have my phone with me, that because I have a panic button with me, that the response will be immediate, that I will be believed, and that I will be supported in my safety. That is not often the case, unfortunately. There's also a level of paternalism, this idea that technology or the state will keep me safe from those who would harm me. And when it comes to these crowd-mapped maps of risk of street harassment, of abuse, there's also a concern around bias. Who has the capability to participate in those systems? What are they reporting? Is there a bias in terms of where those reports are made and what that says about a community? We've heard in the United States and other places about the risks of predictive policing, where past arrests and locations of violence or crime lead to heavier policing, which in turn leads to greater arrests, and it becomes sort of a feedback loop in that cybernetic sense. So to open it up for discussion in just a moment, I would encourage us all to ask, what could go wrong? Who else might use a tool in a way that we're not anticipating? Who else might use a tool very much in the way that it was anticipated, and what harm might that cause? That in all of our decisions around technology and around geographic data, that we are promoting agency and choice, that people have some visibility around how their location is being tracked and some choice about whether they share it, who they share it with, when they share it. And I think that those same sorts of principles pertain whether you're talking about the mapping of young people's location or the mapping of the location of people who may be vulnerable to abuse. I'll stop sharing my slides now and open it up for conversation.
Thank you so much for that, Toby. That was really thoughtful about that particular context, but I love how you started to bring it around to some ideas that relate, as you said, not just to the communities that are dealing with gender-based violence, but now also with young people or any vulnerable or disadvantaged communities. And so I think that's a fabulous theme that's run through both these sessions, which I think of as one session, is that idea that what I'm hearing is that there is a need to give voice